over on the East Coast there. We're going to go ahead and get started. Today's topic for our Wednesday webinar is, are you ready to pass TEM testing? And we're going to be talking a lot about full service and the requirements for getting your electronic documentation approved and all the steps that you'll need in order to go through that process. Before we get started here, I do want to point out the question box, which is in that GoToWebinar panel on the right-hand side of your screen. If at any time throughout the course of this webinar today you have a question or a comment about what's being delivered here, feel free to type that into that questions box over there, and we'll go ahead and answer all of those questions at the end of the webinar today, because we want to make sure that you have all the information you need to get to pass through the TEM system. Additionally, at the end of the webinar today, when you close out of the GoToWebinar program, it'll redirect you to a short survey, and we would really appreciate it if you would fill out that survey and just let us know how useful or not useful these webinars are for you, and suggest any additional topics for future webinars as well, and that'll help us to improve the quality of our webinars in the future. So let's go ahead and get started here. My name is Kim Mock, and I'm the Postal Product Specialist here at Satori. I've been working here about 10 years in full service and TEM and everything to do with these new barcodes and the new systems from the post office are kind of my passion. So we'll be talking a lot about that today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Let's go ahead and start talking about what our agenda is for today. First, we're going to give a kind of a short overview as to what TEM is, why it's required, and when it's going to be required. So some of you may not be required to go through that system, but we'll talk about all of the different things that would make you eligible for that system. We'll talk a little bit about full service and just kind of all the requirements that are going to be part of that system, and show exactly where TEM testing fits in that process. Again, we'll also start talking a little bit about what you'll need. So there are going to be quite a few little individual pieces of information that you'll need to gather before you even start TEM testing. And so we'll talk about all of those different requirements and where to get them. And then we'll also go through every single step that's required in order to go through this new streamlined TEM testing that the Post Office has just released. And in fact, this whole program is relatively new. It was only released last week, and so this will be a great use for a lot of the mailers who are just now getting into full service, because they're going to have a very streamlined system to go through, and it'll be very useful for them. In addition to that, we'll talk about using the TEM environment after you've already passed your initial TEM testing, because there are some benefits for using that environment even after you've already been approved for full service, and we'll talk about those as well. And of course, at the end, we'll give you a bunch of links that you can use as resources. Also, as we go throughout the webinar today, we are recording this webinar, and we will be posting the recording as well as a copy of all of these slides on our website. So if you go to that webinars link on our website, satorisoftware.com, there'll be a link there for our archived sessions, and so we'll have a recording and these slides available in just a few days. So let's go ahead into and talk about what TEM is and how it kind of is the gateway for full service. So TEM stands for the Test Environment for Mailers, and basically what it is it's a testing environment that the Post Office has set up to completely mirror their production Postal One environment. So why is that important? So basically what it is it's a place where you can go and you can submit sample mailings to the post office and make sure that they're going to go through all of the checks and validations that they would do in their production environment without actually submitting a mailing. So this way you're not having your permit account debited, you're not having any mailings, you're not notifying that the post office that you're actually going to be sending physical mail, but it allows you to check to make sure that everything is formatted correctly, that your payment information and your contact information is included correctly within your electronic documentation, and that everything is set up in a proper way so that when you do move to the production environment for Postal One, that everything is set up correctly and that your mailings will be submitted without any trouble. Now, the TEM environment is free, so you can access this system right away. You can also access it after you've already passed your initial TEM testing time. So if you need to do some sample mailings just to see if they're formatted correctly, you can use this environment at any time. There's no limitation on when you have access to that environment. And we're also going to talk about some times when TEM would be required. Most of the mailers that are going to be moving to full service are going to be required to go through TEM just by virtue of the different technologies that are required there for their full service requirements. So let's talk a little bit about the full service requirements that are out there today. So there are really two major steps when it comes to full service. The first is all of these different barcodes that are going to be required. Those are going to be your individual mail piece barcodes, your tray and pallet barcodes, and all of those barcodes, again, do need to be unique for 45 days. Each of those barcodes do have a unique sequence number field that's involved in that, and that sequence number needs to be unique for 45 days, just so the post office can track each of those individual pieces and containers as they go throughout their system. Now, the next step after you have all of the barcodes is to start talking about electronic documentation, and that's really where this TEM environment sits in the process. So for the first thing that you'll do is take a look at all of the electronic documentation methods that are out there today, and you'll select the one that makes the most sense for you. And then after you've done that, then you'll be able to start creating that electronic documentation and then testing it through the test environment for mailers. So let's talk a little bit, just kind of as a quick overview, as to what electronic documentation methods are available and when it makes sense to use any of them. So we do have a more extensive version of, we actually have a separate webinar that describes all of these electronic documentations in great detail and goes into the different reasons as to why you would select one method over another. And so if you have not selected which electronic documentation makes sense for you, then I'd strongly recommend that you go to that recorded section of our website where we have all of our recorded webinars and view the session called From Zero to eDoc in Plain English, because that session will actually go through all of the electronic documentation methods and describe when you would use each. So there are three different ways to satisfy the electronic documentation requirement. There's the Postal Wizard, which is a website where you can type in your postage information from your postage statement. That's going to be limited to mailings that are under 10,000 pieces and that are very basic. So it's only available for first class and standard mail, and only for mailings that are very non-complex. So anytime you have mixed weights or drop shipments or anything along those lines, you wouldn't be using the Postal Wizard. Now, if you're not eligible to use the Postal Wizard, then you would be using either Mail.dat or Mail.XML. Mail.dat is actually a file structure, and so basically it's a large database that, well, it's not terribly large. It's a medium-sized database that includes all the information about your mailing, including all of your intelligent mail barcodes, your postage payment information, so your permit number and everything like that, as well as your contact information and information about the makeup of your mailing. So how many pieces are going at automation 5-digit, how many pieces are going at a non-automation 3-digit rate, and things like that. Mail.XML is actually a communication method. So where Mail.dat is a large file that you would be transmitting all at once, Mail.XML is a short messaging environment that basically transmits the exact same information that you would have in Mail.dat, but does so in a more agile fashion. So it's short text messages rather than being a large encyclopedia of everything to do with your mail. So after you've selected your method, then it's time to start thinking about TEM. And so let's talk a little bit about when TEM is required. Well, actually, let's first start with why TEM testing is required. So when the post office opens up their computer systems, they want to ensure that anyone who is going to be accessing their systems is going to be submitting data that is formed well, that's not going to crash their computers, and also that contains all of that information that they really do need in order to track all of the mail that's coming in. So with the electronic documentation requirement for full service, the Post Office is opening the doors to one of their key computer systems called Postal One. And Postal One is the system that basically runs all of the information about each mailing that's being submitted to the Post Office, how it's being routed, where it's being dropped off at, and everything to do with that. And the Post Office actually uses that information to staff each of their different facilities and to make sure that mail is moving in a regular fashion. Now, because they're opening up one of these key systems, they want to make sure that everybody who's using this system is using it in a good way, right? They're not going to be hacking into their system. They're not going to be submitting junk data that doesn't make any sense, and that everything is going to be handled very well in that environment. And so what they do is they create this kind of a mirrored system called TEM, the Test Environment for Mailers, and basically it does all of the same checks that Postal One does, but without being in that production environment, so it's not actually going to have an impact to the day-to-day operations of the Post Office. So let's talk about who is going to need to go through this TEM environment here. So basically, anytime you're going to be using Mail.dat or Mail.XML to submit your electronic documentation to the Post Office, you are required to go through this test environment for mailers. Again, it's just to make sure that your data is formatted well and that you've entered the correct payment information so that your mailings can be processed very seamlessly. So really the limitation is if you're using the Postal Wizard for all of your mailings, then you would not need to go through the TEM environment. However, if you go over the thresholds for what you need to do in order to submit your electronic documentation and you're no longer eligible for that Postal Wizard, then you would be required to go through TEM. So again, if you're mailing over 10,000 pieces in a single mailing, if you're using any mailings that have any type of complexity, so for example, if you're using periodicals, if you are sending a mailing with multiple weights in it, so you may be mailing some invoices that have different weights throughout the course of the mailing. If you're doing any type of a combined or a multi-segment mailing, then all of those are reasons to use Mail.dat or Mail.XML. And again, anytime you're using either of those technologies, you would need to go through TEM. So let's talk a little bit about what you're going to need in order to get started with the TEM environment. So there are a number of things that you're going to need before we even get started. So the first thing that you're going to need is a Business Customer Gateway account, and that's a free account that you can sign up online. You're going to need some software that will generate your electronic documentation. So the format for the Mail.XML communications and for Mail.dat is rather complex, and so there are several software products out on the market today that will generate that data for you, and that way you don't have to worry about the formatting. In addition to that, you'll need a mailer ID and a customer registration ID, and both of those are two numbers that actually identify you and your barcodes to the Post Office, and it helps the Post Office to understand which mail pieces belong to which mailer. And in addition to that, you'll need a sample mailing job. So you'll need a sample mailing list that you'll use to generate this test file that you'll submit to the TEM environment. So let's go into each of these steps in a little bit more detail. So the first thing that you're going to need is this Business Customer Gateway account. These accounts are free. You can get them at gateway.usps.com. You may have one already if you've already submitted for a mailer ID to create your basic intelligent mail barcodes. But if you haven't yet, then you can log in at gateway.usps.com and just click on that new user registration link right out underneath their login information there. And then you'll be able to create your account here. Now there is a key bit of information when you are signing up for your Business Customer Gateway account. It will direct you to a page where it asks you to select a business service. And there are several services that are going to be listed on this page. I recommend that you just automatically apply for the small business services option because that's going to give you access to the mailer ID request page. That's going to give you access to manage mailing activity, which is actually the key bit of information that that you're going to need in order to do this electronic documentation. You can request these services individually, or if you click on the Small Business Services link, it will apply all of those rights to your account right away. So you can do those all at the same time. Again, if you want to select it individually, you'll need to select that Manage Mailing Activity link, and that will allow you access to that Postal One account there. So after you have your Business Customer Gateway account, the next thing you're going to need is some software to generate your electronic documentation. I do want to point out that all Satori software mailing products do have the ability to generate the electronic documentation. There are some of our products that will produce both Mail.dat and Mail.XML. That's available in our bulk mailer products, and in our Mailroom Toolkit products, we can generate that Mail.dat file for you. Now, you should always contact your software provider to see exactly what they have available. If you're not sure whether you have access to the area that generates that electronic documentation, just call your account manager, and they'll be able to help you out with that. Now, there is a key thing that I do want to point out when we're talking about the electronic documentation and going through TEM, and really for the best results to be able to use this new streamlined TEM service, we strongly recommend that you select a software package that has been approved by the Post Office for electronic documentation. There is a list of all the products that have been approved up on the RIBS website. That's ribs.usps.gov. There's a whole section under there called electronic documentation, and there's an Excel spreadsheet that has all of the software products that have been tested by the Post Office to ensure that the electronic documentation is generated correctly. And so, we do suggest that you take a look at that list and select a product that has been tested. And of course, Satori products have been tested through that as well. So let's talk about the other information that you'll need in order to generate your electronic documentation. The first thing that you'll need here is you're going to need a mailer ID and you'll need a customer registration ID. Now, these are two separate numbers, so you do need both. The mailer ID is going to be either 6 or 9 digits, depending on the mail volume that you have each year. And the mailer ID is actually used in your Intelligent Mail barcodes. So that's going to be used on your pieces, on your trays, and on your pallet barcodes if you use them. And basically what that mailer ID does is that mailer ID links the pieces that you're sending and the containers that you're sending to your electronic documentation. So that's the key purpose of that mailer ID there. Now, in addition to that, you're going to need a customer registration ID. And the customer registration ID can be anywhere from 7 to 10 digits. Usually it's around 7 to 8 digits. And what it is it's a number that identifies your business location. And so if you mail from several different locations, you may have several CRIDs. And so that number is actually going to identify to the post office which location is actually going to be sending this mail. So again, you do want to have both a MID and a CRID, at least one for every single mailing that you do. Now, if you have a 9-digit mailer ID, and for sequence number reasons, in order to keep things unique, you may have multiple mailer IDs, and that's just fine. And you can use multiple mailer IDs in the same mailing, or you can use different mailer IDs for different mailings. That's just fine. If you have several business locations, you may have several customer registration IDs. Now, all of these MIDs and CRIDs they do have a loose association, but they're not linked. It's not a one-to-one relationship. So if you have one mailer ID, you may have multiple CRIDs, or if you have one CRID, you may have multiple mailer IDs, and that's just fine. But all of this information you can actually see from the Business Customer Gateway. So let's take a look at how to access your customer registration ID. So after you've logged into that gateway account at gateway.usps.com, you'll see a link there in your account settings for your profile. And if you just click on that profile link, you'll actually see your customer registration ID. And if you have multiples, those will be listed here as well. And you'll see down at the bottom here that we have our customer registration ID that's available for this account that I created. And and then you would be able to enter that. You would enter that directly into your mail software, which would allow you to enter that into your electronic documentation. Then the other thing, of course, that you'll need is going to be a mailer ID. Hopefully you already have one of these because it is required for those Intelligent Mail basic barcodes. So in order to request a mailer ID, if you don't already have one, is after you, again, you've logged into that gateway website, gateway.usps.com, you'll click on the mailer ID link under the Design and Prepare section here. So you'll just click on that. If you already have a mailer ID, it will display automatically for you. Or you can click to request a mailer ID. And based on your mail volume, the post office will let you know how many mailer IDs you are eligible for. And usually it's just one, but sometimes you could be eligible for 2, 3, 4, 5 mailer IDs, depending on your mail volume. And so I would recommend just requesting as many mailer IDs as you can have, just so that you have them on hand. And after you've requested a mailer ID, it's going to ask you for the different services that you'd like to use in conjunction with this mailer ID. And what we do recommend, of course, is that you will want to be using the full and basic service Intelligent Mail barcode, so you'll want to have that checked off. If you would like to get the ACS, the free ACS information directly back from the full service mailings that you send, then you would want to check that option off. Also, if you would like to track your mail using your own mailer ID, then you would select that IMB tracing option here. Now, anytime you're using full-service ACS or IMB tracing, there is an additional step in order to complete the sign-up for those, just so that the post office knows where to give that information. So the ACS and the tracking information are kind of some feedback mechanisms, so the post office needs to know who to send that data to. And then after you've selected your options, then that mailer ID will display, and you'll be able to take that information and enter it into your pre-sort software, which will generate your Intelligent Mail barcodes, and then those Intelligent Mail barcodes will be included in your electronic documentation there. So now let's go ahead and talk a little bit about mail service providers. So mail service providers do have kind of a special consideration when it comes to your mailer IDs and your CRIDs. So so anytime you're mailing for an additional entity, so if you're mailing for other businesses, if you're a printer or a mail house, and basically you're providing mailing services for other companies, then we consider you to be a mail service provider or an MSP. And one of the key parts of the electronic documentation requirement is the post office requires that you identify both yourself as the mail preparer and also the mail owner. So that this is actually called the by for information. So they're asking who is the mailing by, so who was it prepared by, and that would be the mailing service provider, and who is the mailing prepared for, and that's considered the mail owner. And the way that the post office identifies this by for information is by these mailer IDs and CRIDs. So if you are a mail service provider, you would be required to get these mailer IDs and CRIDs for all of your customers. Now that seems rather onerous when you begin to think about it, because several of you do have hundreds of customers that may or may not already have their own mailer IDs and CRIDs. So the post office has actually put into place a streamlined way of being able to request these mailer IDs and CRIDs for all of your customers. And basically what you would do is they have a formatted Excel spreadsheet that you'll be able to fill out with all of your customer information. You email it into the post office, and then they'll send it back to you with the mailer IDs and CRIDs appended to that Excel spreadsheet. And we have a link here on this slide here. And again, these links will all be available at the end of the slide, and these slides will be available at the end of the session today. But this link here shows goes directly to a USPS instruction page that shows you exactly how to format this Excel spreadsheet and where to send it to get those mailer IDs and CRIDs for your customers. Okay, so now that we have all of the information that we need in order to go through TEM, now it's time to actually start going through this process. So previous to this process, the the post office had a very in-depth way of testing every mailer that went through the test environment for mailers. So you would submit an email to the help desk. They would ask you for all of this information about how you prepare your mailings and how complex they were in different scenarios, and then they would give you a list of different types of mailings that you would be required to generate and submit to the test environment for mailers, and then they would go through and they would manually check each of your different mailings and go through all of these first and second level verifications, and it actually took quite a while. It could take anywhere from a few weeks to several months, and so it was a very onerous process, and it took up quite a bit of mailers' time. Now, in conjunction with software developers and with mailers, the post office realized that in order to get everyone on board with full service, they were going to need to severely streamline this TEM process. They still wanted to have it around just because, again, they are opening up those crucial mail systems there, but they did want to be able to have a way for mailers to get on board with their electronic documentation in a very streamlined way. So, so what they've offered is this new streamlined service, and this is only available for users of this EDOC approved software. So that list that we talked of earlier of all the software packages that have been tested with the post office are going to be eligible for this streamlined service. It is available for any mail owner or mail service provider, provided that you're only going to be sending mailings with a single permit. So if you're doing combined mailings where you're mailing with multiple permits, then you would need to go through that the old TEM process. You are going to be required to send mailings that are only of identical weight pieces. So if you are sending mailings that have mixed weights or manifested, then you would not be eligible for the streamlined service. And then also you would only be able to test mailings of that complexity that has already been tested by your software vendor. So if you were doing a certain thing that your software provider didn't support, so for example, if you were sending intelligent mail pallet placards, for example, and your software package didn't support that, then you would not be eligible for this service. But for most of the users of Satori products, this is going to be available for them. So let's talk a little bit about this. Again, there's that list of approved software products. And then how the process is going to work is first you're going to verify that your mailings are in the tested categories for your software. So basically when you go to that link there for the electronic documentation, you'll see a list of all the software products, and then for each of the different types of mailings that software has been tested for. And so you'll just want to make sure that the mailings that you do fall into those categories. And then what you'll do is basically you'll just use your software to create a sample mailing and pre-sort it, and then you're going to save your postage statements because you're going to use that a little bit later on to verify that your electronic documentation matches with the postage statements that they print out normally. So how you're going to do this for Mail.dat is the first thing you're going to do is after you have logged into the Gateway website, you'll click on a link for the Electronic Data Exchange, and this is basically the Postal One link there. And down underneath the Test Environment for Mailers section, there's going to be a link there to download a client application to upload your Mail.dat files. And so you'll just click on that link to download that client application. It's just a zip file, and then you'll unzip that to your computer. And then there's a file in there called the MD client. And so you'll just open up that application. You'll log in using the same credentials that you log into the Gateway website, and then basically what you'll do is in your software you'll save that Mail.dat file to your computer. And then you'll use that Mail.dat client that you downloaded from the post office to upload that Mail.dat file to the test environment for mailers. And when you do that, there's going to be an option to either validate or to validate and upload. You're going to select that validate and upload option there. And when you upload that Mail.dat file, that client application will let you know the job ID that was created for that job that you created. And you'll just want to write that down because that's going to be important a little bit later on. Now, if you're using Mail.XML and Satori products, what you'll do is after you've pre-sorted your list and printed out your postage statements, you'll go into the Submit tab in Bulk Mailer, and you'll enter in your username and password that you use to access the gateway, and you'll submit that mailing job to the post office. And then when you're done with that, there'll be an option there to print out a report just giving you the status of your Mail.XML submission. You can just print that out, and it'll have that job ID that you'll need, or you can note that the letters and numbers of that job ID so that you can use those a little bit later. So after you've submitted using either the Mail.dat client or Mail.XML, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to log back in to that electronic data exchange page on the gateway site there, and you'll click on the Go to TEM link that's available underneath the test environment for mailers. And what that's going to do is that's going to open up the TEM environment. And so what you'll do there is you'll click on the dashboard, and there'll be a section there in the dashboard that will allow you to search for your mailings. So basically what I do at this point is I just search for all of my mailings. I'll create a wide date range, make sure that I include all statements, and then click the search button, and it'll show you all of the test submissions that you have sent to the test environment for mailers. And then what you'll do, if you've only had one, you'll be able to see your mailing right there, or if you've sent several, you'll be able to see all of those there. And so once you've found that job ID that you wrote down when you submitted that mailing, you'll just be able to click on that job ID, and that way you'll be able to view all of your mailing reports. So basically what has happened is from the electronic documentation that you've submitted to the post office is regenerating those postage statements and qualification reports that your software is generating automatically. So here, what you're going to do is you're going to take the postage statement that you created out of your software, and you're going to compare that postage statement to the statement that is in the test environment for mailers. They're going to be formatted pretty similarly. They look a little bit different just because one's kind of more web-enabled and one's a little bit more designed for print. But basically what you're going to check is you're going to check that the number of pieces is the same, that the weight, the total weight of the mailing is the same, that the permit information has been populated correctly in your postage statement on the TEM website there, and that the total postage is the same. Now, if the total postage is a little bit off, sometimes the product that you were using to sort didn't calculate the Intelligent Mail full service discount, and so you would want to make sure that that's populated correctly inside of your electronic documentation as well. You'll also want to take a look at the qualification report that you can take a look at on the test environment for mailers, and you'll want to compare that with your printed qualification report as well, just to make sure that everything lines up. And then at that point, if there are any differences, at that point, feel free to contact your software provider, because sometimes there's just a small thing that you'll need to change in order to make sure that that information matches up. Sometimes, believe it or not, there are bugs in the Postal One system, so sometimes we do have to contact the post office to let them know what the differences are there. But we'll be glad to help you out to make sure that that your printed paperwork and your paperwork inside the test environment match up completely there. Now, assuming there are no differences, which for most mailers there won't be, at this point you are almost done with TEM. And this is one of the nice things about this streamlined environment is the streamlined version is basically all done on your side, so you're not waiting for the post office to get back to you here. So after you've verified that you have a job that matches up completely, and again, this was used, this testing was done with a software package that was eDocs verified there. Then what you're going to do is you're going to send an email to the Postal One help desk, and that's postal1@usps.gov, and you'll include just a little bit of information about the mailing that you sent, so your company name and address, the customer registration ID that you used to generate this electronic documentation, the job ID that you submitted to TEM, And then you'll also, of course, let them know that, that you submitted it and that the electronic documentation matches your printed paperwork and that everything should be ready to go. So at that point, what will happen is the help desk is actually going to take a look at that, make sure that you are using the software that you say you are, and at that point you will be approved in TEM and you'll be able to move to production. And at that point, you're pretty much approved to do full service as well. So you've already done all of your barcoding changes. Now you've got all of your electronic documentation changes as well, and you'll be approved to move completely over to full service. So that's the really nice thing with this new streamlined environment, is it cuts down on the testing time significantly. Sometimes we've seen mailers with as short a turnaround time as 24 hours after they've sent this email off to Postal One to get their approval letter. So, it's a very, very streamlined process, especially compared to the weeks that it used to be. So let's talk a little bit about how you can use TEM after you've passed your full service testing. Now, we do strongly recommend that any mail service providers that are mailing for their customers, that they send jobs for multiple customers to the test environment just to make sure that the information is getting populated correctly. So there are several different scenarios that can happen here, especially if you're using your own permit versus your customer's permit. You may want to test both of those scenarios. If you mail for several different customers and you use the same mailer ID for them, then you'll want to test those as well, just to make sure that everything gets populated in your electronic documentation correctly, and you'll be able to use this test environment as kind of a sandbox just to make sure that everything's okay before you start submitting these mailings to production. Also, as your mailing business evolves, you may start adding additional services for your customers, and you can use this test environment for mailers to test out these new different mailing scenarios to make sure that everything is getting populated correctly. So, for example, if you've never done standard mail before, you may want to start submitting some sample jobs to TEM for your standard mail jobs before you start moving to production, just to make sure that everything gets populated correctly there. Again, TEM is open at any time, so you can use it with any mailing. Some mailers actually will submit all of their mailings to TEM first to make sure that they're verified and then submit them to production. I don't think all mailers need to go that in-depth with their testing, but it is a really useful way of being able to verify that the documentation is correct before you actually start submitting that into the production environment. So let's talk a little bit about some resources that are available. Again, you will want that business customer gateway account. That's gateway.usps.com. We do want to let you know about some resources to be able to generate that intelligent mail barcode and generate full service inside of Satori software products. So we have a very extensive intelligent mail section on our website there. Also, on that same electronic documentation page on RIBS, there is a link to several different test environment for mailer guides. So some of them are pretty lengthy; they can get to be 30 pages or more. But there are a few shorter guides that are available on that website as well. And then, of course, for our mail service providers, anybody who wants to request multiple mailer IDs and CRIDs for their customers, here's the link there. We kind of shortened it down using that bit.ly website just because the link itself is rather long and hard to remember. So you can just link to that, and that will go directly to the USPS instructions for requesting your MIDs and CRIDs for your customers. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and open up the webinar for any questions that you may have. Again, feel free to type in any questions that you have into that questions box in the GoToWebinar panel on the right-hand side of your screen. And we're going to go ahead and go through all of these questions here and make sure that everybody's questions are answered. If you have any questions after the webinar today, feel free to contact our support department. They're very knowledgeable when it comes to electronic documentation and full service and everything like that, and they would be happy to help you. You can contact them via email at support@satorisoftware.com, or you can call us directly at 800-357-3020, and then we'll be happy to help here. Okay, let's go ahead and get into all the questions that we have here. So the first question is is TEM testing required for the Postal Wizard full service IMB? So if you are only using the Postal Wizard to submit your electronic documentation, which means you have simple mailings, you're not sending periodicals, and you're only ever mailing less than 10,000 pieces at a time, then no, you would not be required to go through the TEM testing because basically you're using a USPS website to type in your postage statement information. The next question is, can you guesstimate how much, if any, involvement in IT department may be required, or will bulk mailer handle most issues? That's actually a great question, and it really depends on the technology that you use. So again, you can use either Mail.dat or Mail.XML. If you're using Mail.XML, you'll need to make sure that the standard internet ports are going to be open. So your port 80 for internet communication will need to be open in order to communicate using Mail.XML. And there may be some other considerations for the Mail.dat client. I'm not entirely familiar with that, but as far as the IT sides go, but generally, if you have the standard internet communication ports open, then you shouldn't have any additional IT changes in order to submit your electronic documentation. The next question is, you mentioned the Postal Wizard could be used for eDoc. Does it satisfy the full service requirements as well as the tech credit requirements? So this is actually a great question because some of you may have gotten a letter from the post office telling you that you are eligible for a technology credit to move to full service. And the one kind of gotcha when it comes to this tech credit is in order to be eligible for this tech credit, you have to use either Mail.dat or Mail.XML. If you are eligible for the tech credit, you cannot use the Postal Wizard to actually redeem that credit. So you would need to go through the Mail.dat or Mail.XML to redeem that credit, and you would need to go through TEM before you could redeem it. So the next question asks, sorry if this is off topic, but can we use the Postal Wizard with a variable serial number which would allow us to do IMB tracing? Or is this another thing that would force the use of Mail.dat or Mail.XML? So, the answer to that is actually the IMB tracing is not linked to full service at all. And so as long as you are using a variable sequence number in your intelligent mail barcodes, then you would be able to get your tracing data, and it's independent completely of which technology you use for electronic documentation. The next question is, why would we want more than one mailer ID? And that's a great question because basically when you have a 9-digit mailer ID, which is what most mailers will have, you have 6 digits in what they call the sequence number field, which means you have about 1 million pieces that you can use to stay unique across your 45 days. So if you send more than 1 million pieces in that 45-day period, then you're no longer compliant with the uniqueness requirement for your intelligent mail barcodes. So, so if you feel like you're going to be sending more than 1 million pieces within that 45-day period, then you would need an additional mailer ID to continue to have your intelligent mail barcodes to stay unique. Okay, the next question was about the link in the slide to the USPS site with the CRID request for mail service providers. And so I'll actually include, we'll be sending out an email to everyone who attended today, and it will include the full link for that mailer ID and CRID request process, as well as that shortened link. The next statement here says, one note here, the production client and the TEM client are different. Yes, for Mail.dat, there is a separate application that you'll use to upload your Mail.dat files to the TEM environment versus the production or the live environment. So you would need to download the separate client for production. The next question is, when will the recording and slides be available to review? We'll be posting those as soon as we can. Usually we can get those up within 24 hours. And again, those will be available on our website. The next question is, can you do full service with Mailroom Toolkit, or must you move to another product? Full service is supported within Mailroom Toolkit, and you'll be able to use Mail.dat to satisfy the electronic documentation requirement there. Next question, are both Mail.XML and Mail.dat supported in Bulk Mailer Professional? Yes, both of those are available in Bulk Mailer. The next question is, if the tech credit is approved this summer and I get certified for full service now, will I get my credit retroactively? It's actually not retroactive. What will happen is the very first mailing that you send that has at least 90% automation and 90% full service pieces in your mailing will be used to redeem that credit. So if you have been mailing full service for years, then you'll get that credit on the very first day that credit is active. So it's not a retroactive, so you're not going to be getting a check from the post office, but that very first mailing that you send after that tech credit is active, that is 90% full service or more, you'll be able to redeem that credit at that time. The next question is, if you have multiple permits, do all permits have to go full service at the same time? No. And in fact, full service, it has more to do with your capabilities than it does your mailings. So for example, if you wanted to go through the steps to do all of your testing now and make sure that you are eligible for the tech credit, and you wanted to get everything in line and ready to go, but not actually send any full service mailings until, say, the tech credit is active, then you could do that. So you could, and then even after that date, so after you've redeemed all of your tech credit, you could go back and do a few mailings that are still the basic service, and do some that are full service as well. So it's not a huge leap. You're not having to jump in with all of your permits or with all of your mailings there. The next question, do you know if mail service providers receive all documentation via Postal One, including address corrections, or whether they are the owners of the mailing or not? And that has to do with how you fill out that buy for information in your software. So so you can set it up to receive all of the documentation, so all of the tracking and the ACS information, or you can have that set to the customer. Again, that has to do with that process of signing up your mailer IDs and defining who is going to get that information and how the post office is going to send that back. So you could set that up to send to your customers or send to you. It's up to you. The next question, when doing TEM testing, the test files that you send, should they be over the 10,000 pieces, or is it okay to be smaller? It's entirely fine to have a smaller mailing. In fact, I've done a couple tests through TEM that have had only just a couple hundred pieces in that mailing. So the requirement for 10,000 pieces is basically the line for whether you're going to be using the Postal Wizard or not. So the rule of thumb is if you do any mailing that's over 10,000 pieces, then you would not use the Postal Wizard. Next question asks, I have had my mailer ID and CRID for a long time. I don't know if they have full or basic service, full service ACS, or IMB tracing. How can I find out if these are checked, or will I need a new number? You can actually add those services to your existing numbers, so you wouldn't need to do that. And if you're interested in that, then we can talk offline, or you can contact the help desk, and they'll be able to. And in fact, I would just directly ask the department, either the IMB tracing or the ACS department, to set that up for you, and they'll be able to add that to your existing mailer IDs. The next question is, as a mail service provider, is it possible to get a second CRID for a customer for use only by that MSP? So the CRIDs aren't going to be limited for your customers to only be used by you, but especially the CRIDs. Now, you could do that for a mailer ID, but not for a CRID, because the CRID identifies that customer's location. If you would like to request a second CRID for a customer, then you can contact the help desk. That's postal1@usps.com, and they should be able to, or I'm sorry, usps.gov is their email address there, and they should be able to set that up for you. The next question is, we currently attach the additional postage to the postal paperwork or bring a check to the post office when we submit a mailing. Will we have to use a postal permit and pay electronically instead? No, you shouldn't be needing to change your payment methods in order to move to full service. The next question is, are there additional costs to check the boxes in your mailer ID area on Postal One for full-service ACS and IMB tracing? Should I have already checked the boxes? Will my mailer ID change if I go back and check those boxes now? So if you already have a mailer ID and you want to add either of these services, IMB tracing is free. So if you want the raw data that the post office is giving out, you can use that with any mailing that you have. It is very raw data, and so it's not very intelligible unless you have a service to interpret that data in a way that makes sense. So we do have an easy track service that will basically interpret the raw data, which is basically just a bunch of numbers in a text file, and it'll actually put it into reports that make a little bit more sense. So that IMB tracing is free. Now with ACS, you will only be charged if you set the bit in the barcode. So if you in your barcode settings choose to use ACS, and then you have mail that should have been forwarded that wasn't, and so you would only be charged for that in that case. So you would have to turn on that information in your barcode, and you would have to send a mailing that didn't have an address that should have been updated. So so there's a little bit of a charge for ACS, but there's no charge for IMB tracing. And your mailer ID would not change. You would just be adding that service to your mailer ID. Okay, the next question asks, I've submitted mailings over 10,000 to Postal One and they've been accepted. Is that normal? Also, if I'm using bulk mailer, is there an extra charge to use electronic documentation? So right now, what you've been submitting to Postal One through the Postal Wizard is likely a basic service mailing and not a full service mailing. So there is a checkbox in the Postal Wizard that allows you to check whether it's a full service mailing, and you likely haven't been checking that box. But the Postal Wizard should not be accepting any mailing for full service that's over 10,000 pieces. The other question is asking whether there's an additional charge for electronic documentation in bulk mailer. You should contact your account manager when it comes to that. There may be a way to get that that service, and I'm honestly not sure what the cost would be. The next question is, what are the requirements for full service for periodicals? So for periodicals, if you would like to continue to get automation discounts, you would be required to migrate to full service by January 2014. Again, you would be eligible for all the services that First Class and Standard Mail are. So, so if you've got your tech credit letter, then you should be eligible for that as well. But the requirements for full service are exactly the same for periodicals as they are for First Class and Standard Mail, which means you would be able to you would need to have unique barcodes on your pieces, your trays, and your pallets. You would need to have electronic documentation, which for periodicals is going to be either Mail.dat or Mail.XML, and you'll need to go through this test environment. Next question, how do you get a mailer ID and CRID for a customer? I would suggest taking a look at the resources page of our presentation today. We'll be posting that very shortly, and there's a link for how to get those mailer IDs and CRIDs for your customers. The next question is still not sure which method we should use for bulk mailers. Should we use Mail.dat or Mail.XML? And for that, I would actually recommend that you watch our webinar that's been recorded called From Zero to eDoc in Plain English, and it goes through in more detail the differences between Mail.dat and Mail.XML, and it should give you a little bit more insight into which was going to be best for your business. The next question is, if you process mailings that are both over and under 10,000 pieces, would you go back and forth between the Postal Wizard and Mail.dat or use Mail.dat for all mailings? That's really up to you, but we do recommend that you stick with one technology, just so that way you're not going back and forth between different processes. It's always easier when you just have one process to manage. And so, so I would recommend just using Mail.dat for all mailings, but if you wanted to use both, then that's really up to you. The next question is, I'm only sending mailings under 10,000 pieces and use Satori. Do I need to go through the TEM test? And that's really up to you again. If you want to use the Postal Wizard, which is again is acceptable, then then you would not need to go through the test environment for mailers. But if you do decide to use Mail.dat or Mail.XML, then you would be required to go through that. The next question is if the number of trays changes, say paperwork says 10 but actually needed 12, will that be a problem, or is the overall weight a much more important thing we have to match? The weight is definitely more important. If you do have changes that happen post-production, we do have some tools that will allow you to edit your electronic documentation. We do have a product called Mail.DB, which will allow you to edit Mail.dat files, which is actually one of the reasons why you might want to choose Mail.dat as your option. Is if you do need to make edits after the fact, then you would want to use Mail.dat because that's a little bit easier to edit there. Next question is just curious, what will happen to mailers who do not go to full service? And that's actually a great question, because what's going to happen is those mailers will no longer get automation discounts. So they'll be paying the non-automation price. The next question is, can we change an existing 9-digit or a 6-digit mailer ID to a 9-digit? You can't change your existing mailer ID number, but you can request an additional 9-digit mailer ID if that applies to you. If you have a 6-digit mailer ID, congratulations, because not a lot of mailers get that, because you have to have a pretty high volume in order to get that 6-digit mailer ID. Mail.dat are Mail.dat and XML available on all versions of Bulk Mailer or just Bulk Mailer Professional? They're available with Bulk Mailer Professional and Bulk Mailer Business. The next question, can the Mail.dat upload client run automated through another program or from the command line? Yes, it can. So there is some documentation that's downloaded along with that client that allows you to set up some automation process that allow you to have, so for example, like a watch folder. So as soon as you drop a Mail.dat file into it, it'll automatically upload it to Postal One, things like that. So there's a lot of flexibility with that. Are there any costs associated with ACS and tracking? ACS, again, you would only be charged for addresses that you should have forwarded but you didn't. And for tracking, you can get the raw data directly from the post office. Again, it's not terribly intelligible, but it is available. If you'd like to have an interpretation service like our Easy Track service, there is a small charge for that. The next question, will Bulk Mailer automatically generate a unique barcode every 45 days? Yes, we do have a service inside of Bulk Mailer that will automatically track your barcodes. The next question is, based on earlier questions, do we have access to our customers' mailer IDs and CRIDs if we requested them on their behalf? Yes, so you would have access to those numbers. The next question is, my customers don't know if they have a CRID or not. How do I find out if they have one and what it is? You would actually just go through that same request process. If they already have a CRID, then the post office will just send you what their CRID is. They won't be generating a new one. The next question is, are there times when TEM is down due to volume? There are some update times that, so anytime Postal One, the production environment is down for an upload or an update, then the next day the TEM environment is down for a short period of time, and so there are some times when it's down. Those times are getting less and less, fortunately, so they're getting better with that. The next question is, so we don't have to have a CAPS account to use full service ID? No, you don't need a CAPS account to do full service. Okay. The next question is, so basically, what is e-induction processing? That's a new system that the post office is piloting for dropship mailers. If you're not familiar with it, don't worry about it, because it's not going to be a requirement for a while. Next question is it correct that I will need to purchase electronic documentation before I use TEM? Yeah, you will need the electronic documentation functionality before you can start submitting that to the TEM environment. The next question is, after you do the TEM test, do you get an email saying you're approved? Yes, that would be the next step, is after you've submitted saying that that everything matches up, then you would get an email back saying that you're approved and you're ready to go full service. Okay. So that looks like we covered all of the questions. We're running a little bit over here. So I would like to thank everybody for coming to our webinar today. When you close out of the program today, then we would appreciate it if you would fill out our short survey that will display there. That'll help us to improve the quality of our webinars in the future. And again, we'll be posting a recording of this along with the slides on our website in the archived sessions link there, and you'll be able to access and replay this at any time. Again, we'd like to thank everyone for coming today, and we hope you have a great day.